Concordance is the translational practice of using the same English word to translate the same Greek or Hebrew word. It really helps the student follow the flow of thought through a paragraph if the translation follows concordance, but the problem is that kind of repetition is generally viewed as poor English. Well, I found two examples of concordance, or the lack thereof. One's actually in Hebrew, Genesis 3:15, and the other is in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 7:13. So let's take a look at both of them. This is God's curse on the serpent, and it says, "I will put hostility between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring." And now here's the point. He, the offspring of the woman, will strike, notice the verb, your head, and you, the serpent, will strike his heel. Okay, notice that there is concordance here, and the CSB is using strike for the same Hebrew word in both places. The only thing that's different is head and heel. Here's the issue. What is the difference? Does this mean that Jesus and Satan are just going to beat up each other and that's it? Well, if you look at it, you realize striking the head is one thing, striking the heel is something else. And if you know your theology or anything about Christianity, striking your head means that Jesus is going to destroy Satan, and Satan striking Jesus' heel, since the heel is not that vulnerable part of the body, doesn't result in death, that this means he's just going to damage him. So if you just follow concordance and have strike, strike, you can still kind of figure out what the sentence means. If you look at the various translations, you'll see that almost all of them follow concordance. NASB is bruise and bruise. ESV, bruise, bruise. NRSV, strike, strike. CSB we saw was strike and strike. Net Bible is strike and strike. NLT is even, and I'm a little surprised at this. It's strike and strike. They keep concordance. And then, as you would expect, the King James also keeps concordance, bruise, bruise. They're just leaving up to you to notice that one is the striking of a head, which means kill, and striking of the heel, which means hurt. What caught my eye was the NIV. "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." In other words, they've kept strike with the heel, meaning Satan's going to hurt Jesus, but they switched to crush to indicate that a striking of the head is a mortal wound. Jesus and Satan are not going to suffer the same effects. Again, you would get this out of thinking about bruising the head and bruising the heel, but the NIV went ahead and made it more explicit. This is one of the challenges that any translation has. Do you keep concordance, or do you help the reader understand what the words mean, even though it means you don't have concordance? It's an issue of your translation philosophy. Now here's another example of concordance, or the lack thereof, and it's a place where I think the NIV should have followed concordance. It's, Jesus says, Sermon on the Mount, "Enter through the narrow stenes gate. For wide is the gate, and easy the way that leads to destruction, and many are those who enter through it. But how stene," same word, "is the gate, and difficult the way that leads to life." In other words, this narrow gate and this narrow gate are the same gate. That's why I was a little surprised in the NIV to see them shift from narrow to small, as if what Jesus is saying in verse 14 is a little different. It's a different gate, or there's something different about that gate. Well, this is just a stylistic shift, and the NIV does this a lot. NIV is beautiful English style, and English style doesn't want repetition, although I think this repetition would have been helpful. What's really surprising to me is the NASB doesn't keep concordance. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is small. I mean, I was shocked to see that because the NASB would almost always keep its concordance. ESV, narrow, narrow. NRSV, narrow, narrow. CSB, narrow, narrow. Net Bible, narrow, narrow. NLT, narrow, narrow. So why the NASB didn't keep concordance is a complete mystery to me. Why the NIV didn't keep concordance is in line with their translation philosophy. But I think in this case, they should have kept concordance.